So hadith in Arabic means speech, but the conventional tradition is that hadith means the speech of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's what it means in fiqh. Next time we'll talk about Islamic jurisprudence and we'll stop there, inshallah. We want to we'll end that series. These are some references. If you need any of these references, they are downstairs in the, we have a bookstore, but it's not very well organized. So every Muslim should have the 40 hadiths by Imam Nawawi. These are the very famous hadiths that Imam Nawawi gathered from all the other books of hadith. And there are some recent ones called 40 Hadith Qudsi. These are recent prints. And there is a book by Dr. Yusuf al-Qaradawi called The Sunnah, Source of Civilization. And there are some very small booklets like Dear Beloved Son by Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. It's an advice he gave to his young students, not adults. It shows really the day of the Prophet from the time he wakes up until he goes to sleep. And a famous book also is Gardens of the Righteous by Imam al-Nawawi. The last 6 books, these are the books of hadith. These are, if you want to get them, they are, each one is that volume, that big. And I'll explain why. And these are the 6 scholars that collected their books of hadith. So what is the definition of sunnah and hadith? Sunnah means tradition, and it means, when we talk in Islamic context, means the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. And we're going to talk about the collection of the hadith, the classification of hadith, some examples. So in fiqh, sunnah means the collection of the tradition of the Prophet, including his sayings, actions, preferences, and religious rulings, and as well as some of the narrations of the companions. As you know, the scholar like Imam Malik considered that what the companions of the Prophet did is a source of legislation, because these were the closest people to him, and they would not do anything that is not in accordance with Islam. And hadith is a subset of sunnah. Although the common man in the Muslim world mixes both, can say sunnah and hadith are the same. But hadith is the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, the subset of the sunnah, and includes the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. So sunnah is the general tradition of the Prophet ﷺ and what his companions reported about him. So not necessarily with sayings, but hadith is part of the sunnah, what he said. So it's important to remember that the Prophet ﷺ was very much concerned during his lifetime that people would mix up the hadith, what he says, with the Quran. Although the style is very different. I mean, there is no comparison between the style of the Prophet ﷺ and the style of the Quran. And as we know, the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but still he was concerned. Only near the end of his lifetime, when the Quran was almost complete, he authorized them to write what he is saying. So most of his sayings were transmitted verbally over many decades. Many companions also kept records of what they heard the Prophet ﷺ, and they kept it private. Among them, Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of the famous companions of the Prophet, his cousin also, and he was the 4th righteous Khalifa. Only during the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and Umar al-Aziz is considered the 5th righteous Khalifa, although he was separated from the last righteous Khalifa, Ali ibn Abi Talib, by almost 60 years, and this is a long history, but he was one of the righteous people who ruled during the Umayyad dynasty. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz ruled only for 2 years, less than 24 months. And he asked the scholars to start collecting the hadith. The great founders of Islamic schools made their own collections, even before Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Imam Malik, one of the founders of one of the main schools of thought, who died in 179 after Hijrah. He lived almost for 90 years. He had Al-Muwatta. Al-Muwatta is a very famous book. It's the source of his school of thought. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he had Al-Musnad. Remember, the. So sometimes you find, I would say, the Muwatta, the Musnad, but al means the in Arabic. So it depends whether you want to keep the entire name of the reference in Arabic or mix English and Arabic. And Imam al-Shafi'i. Imam al-Shafi'i, who lived between 150 and 204, he established the basis of jurisprudence. And his book, Al-Umm means the mother. It's as if he was saying that this is the mother of the fiqh. And Imam al-Shafi'i, he taught us how the fiqh can vary from one region to another. When he lived in Iraq, he had certain rulings. He reversed these rulings when he lived in Egypt, because the completely different kind of people, history, and so on. So it's the four imams. Of course, there was also Imam Abu Hanifa, he's the earliest one, even before Imam Malik. They taught us that you have to adapt the fiqh to the different regions, the different people, and Islam is extremely flexible. Islam gives guidelines, and then the fuqaha have to make ijtihad. There are 8 schools of thoughts in Islam. And as I was listening to a lecture by Tariq Sudan and other scholars, the 4 schools of thoughts are Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam al-Shafi'i, and there is also Al-Abadiyya. These are a small minority who live in Oman and live in North Africa. And there are also Al-Zahiriyya, Imam Ahmad ibn Hazm. It's a fiqh that's developed for Muslims in Spain, where Muslims were a minority living among a majority of non-Muslims. So his fiqh was slightly different because he understood things in a different way. And also there is the fiqh of the Shia al-Ja'fari. And don't listen to those people who make a big difference between the Shia and so on. This is sick. There is a lot of similarity. I don't want to go into detail. So many of the scholars consider the fiqh of the Ithna Ashariyya and they take from it. And the Zaydiyya also. And the Zaydiyya also are Shia. So when you hear Shia, don't get nervous. Many Muslims, they get nervous because they are minority and they think the Zaydiyya are very close to the Sunni. And they take from the Muslim Sunni scholars, and the Sunni scholars take from the Zaydi. These are the scholars, but the majority of people in Muslim countries have been divided along political lines. That's why I find this sensitivity against different Shia schools. Now I'm going to talk about the great scholars who collected the hadith. So these books written by the scholars, they were really verbal collections, and what they got from the Sahaba who reported things. But there was no collection of hadith, and there was no criteria. These scholars, their contribution is that they started scrutinizing everything that was reported from the Prophet. You're talking here 200 years. So there's going to be some errors in the transmissions. So these people, their main contributions, they started sorting through all the traditions, and they said, this is the criterion that we're going to have. And all of them, so the highest level of criterion was put by Imam Bukhari, and then by Imam Muslim, and then the other 4 followed their rules. But basically, when you see a hadith mentioned by the 6 schools of thoughts, this is the highest level of authenticity. Then when you hear a hadith mentioned by Bukhari and Muslim, and it's always in the books of fiqh, it says, Rawahu al-Shaykhayn, narrated by the 2 scholars. When you hear the word 2 scholars, it means Bukhari and Muslim. And then, if it's mentioned by Imam Bukhari, it's mentioned, that's the 3rd category in strength. So the hadiths have strength. And Muslims, scholars, have never been arrogant, like many other traditions and religions, where they have always said that we think this is the truth, but we may be wrong. That was always the attitude of all the scholars. So when it came to hadith, they saw some variations, and that's why they started scrutinizing it. So what are the classification? These scholars said the classification of hadith. I'm not a scholar, but this is the simplest thing that I can understand. I can relate it to you. So sahih means authentic, but sahih has varying degrees of authenticity. So there are sayings of the Prophet that were narrated by multitude of people. This is the highest level of authenticity. Like, what is it? For example, the way we pray. The way we pray has been reported by hundreds, if not by tens and hundreds of companions. So there is no debate about it. There are ahadith that are mentioned by one person. So there's always possibility. These are human beings. They are not prophets. So there's always a possibility that one person may have misunderstood, but I'm going to tell you what the criteria they took from the people who narrate the hadith. It's not something. It's not for somebody like me or anybody to say that one person is not going to be reliable, because they had put varies, but there is always a possibility. This is what the scholars always said. That's why most scholars have never accused somebody of being out of Islam based on one hadith. So there's always a small possibility that maybe that hadith was very special for particular people, particular circumstances. The next in strength is Hasan, which means it's good and acceptable. And it's not as strong as the Sahih. Da'if means weak. And weak means missing some of the 5 criteria I'm going to tell you about. Mawdu' means invented. And there are thousands of ahadith that were invented. And the 6 scholars, they are the ones who sorted through all of these ahadith and weeded them out from the tradition. So I'll give you an example of a mawdu'. Imam al-Mahdi, Khalifa al-Mahdi, at the time of the Abbasis, the poets used to come and give poetry to the Khulafa. And a poet came, and he knew that Khalifa al-Mahdi likes pigeons, raises pigeons. So he mentioned to him a hadith that the Prophet praised those who raise pigeons. So the Khalifa gave him a big reward. Then when he left, I swear by Allah that he's a liar. But I gave him so that he would not say that I rejected the hadith of the Prophet. So these are examples of people used to invent a hadith. And people used to invent a hadith for political reasons, for other reasons, to be close to the Khulafa and so on. In our time, the common people narrate a lot of hadiths that are not correct. So it's good to be careful with that. What are the 5 criteria of hadith? A sahih has to meet these 5 criteria. 3 of them about the narrators and 2 about the content of the hadith. This is the most important thing for us to understand as Muslims, general knowledge about hadith, the 3 criteria and the 2 criteria. The first 3 criteria is the piety and character of all narrators. The narrator of a hadith, these were impeccable persons. For example, Imam al-Bukhari, this famous example, I'm sure you heard it, Imam al-Bukhari used to travel thousands of miles to go and collect hadith. He would travel across Asia or go from one town to one town, hearing about one person having a hadith from the Prophet. In one instance that was related about him, that he went to a person who claimed who have heard a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, and then while he would always try to know the person. So he stayed with the person, and he found that person, when he tries to call his horse, he would bring a bag filled with rocks and shake the rock and make sound, so the horse would think that there is food. So he'd bring the horse just to take it by the leash. And he told him, how do you lie for the horse? So that's example how Imam Bukhari used to be very strict about the character of the person. The piety and character of there are many things that we do in modern time that would negate the piety of the person. Among them is eating in public. I don't mean eating in a restaurant, but eating while walking. So eating a sandwich and walking, this is the early Muslims never did, and the Prophet hated it. The Prophet hated it that a person would drink while walking in public or eating while walking. You have to sit down or you have to be in private. So these are very simple things. Other things, if a person is always seen in the markets haggling and or going to entertainment places, this will completely negate the character of the person. So most of the narrators of hadith were people of impeccable character. The memory and mental capacity of all narrators. A person can be very pious, but he does not have good memory. And most people don't have good memory. But to give you an example of how the early, the Arabs in particular, had a very strong memory. Imam Shafi'i, one of the scholars I've mentioned, he said he can read a book, an entire book, and memorize it after reading it. He doesn't need to go back. So most of the Arabs, these generations, because these were illiterate societies, they did not record. So they had to remember, had very strong memory. Most of the Arabs who lived in Arabia, in Mecca and surrounding, the poets will come and present their poetry in the markets and so on, like Suq Uqaz, one of the famous markets that they had once a year. And the poets will come and recite their poems, and people would memorize it by heart, listening to it once. So this is the how people had very strong memory, but not everybody. So they had to check the memory of all narrators. For example, Imam Hassan al-Basri, very famous scholar, narrated very few hadiths because he did not have a strong memory. Does not make the person not a good Muslim or not having piety, but they looked for that. The third thing is continuation of chain of narrators. They will not accept the hadith to be correct if a person say, I heard from my grandfather, and my grandfather heard it from somebody else, I don't know who he is. That cuts the narration. The narration is not continuous. And so the 3 things about the narrators, and then the 2 criteria is about the content of the hadith. It has to be consistent with the Quran. If it contradicts the Quran, the hadith will not be considered sahih. Or other strong tradition, like that could be many hadiths related to, for example, an act of worship, but one hadith come and is not consistent with it, then it's considered da'if, not sahih. And the last thing is that the words should be free from Arabic defects. The Prophet ﷺ was so eloquent. As you know, he was raised in in the desert among the pure Arabs who had really the pure language, he never said spoken Arabic, broken Arabic. So if they see it's broken, they know it came from people who, because Islam spread to so much into the world, and people were not learning Arabic, but were not having it as their mother language. So you could find some ahadith that were invented, and the Arabic is, you can see immediately it's not correct Arabic. Or having strange sayings. That's like a huge reward for something very little, or a huge punishment for something very little. So these are hadiths that they consider da'if or mawdu'. So remember these three things. Three categories, three criteria related to the narrators: piety, character, and the character, memory and mental capacity, continuation of chain of narrator, and two related to the content. The Bible, as it was transmitted to us, does not meet these criteria. The Bible or the Gospels of Jesus. So some people among the Orientals, they say, oh, the Hadith can be compared, authenticity compared to the Bible, or to be compared to the Gospels. There is no comparison. There is no comparison. Definitely the Bible does not meet any of these criteria. So the Muslims developed a science, that particular science is called the science of Hadith, and it's called the science of Jarh wa Ta'dil, means the science of investigating people. So it's the whole idea here is about, are the people saying the truth or not? And even if they think they say the truth, do they really saying the truth? Do they really have good memory? Do they have the chain of translation narrated from the Prophet ﷺ until that person who narrates it? So that's a particular science, and I'm presenting to you in a very simple way. There are people who spend their life studying this science. So what do you need to study the science of Hadith? You have to be very proficient in the Arabic language. You have to understand the Quran perfectly, of course, memorize it, understand every ayah, where it was revealed, why it was revealed, understand history. You have to have the knowledge of the narrators. So you ask why, for example, the hadiths that are correct by the Prophet, Sahih, are around 4,000. Okay? And each hadith probably is few lines. Why Imam al-Bukhari came with volumes, or Imam Muslim and Tirmizi? Because the hadith can be few lines, but the narrators can take it several pages. And description of the narrators. How did Imam al-Bukhari came to know about them? Which family they came from, and so on. So that's something that really established the truth of what was transmitted to us. Knowledge of history is very important. Like very famous hadith, a hadith that's mawdu', it's invented, said that Sayyidah Aisha died in Wasit. Wasit is in Iraq, okay? And it is well known that she died before Al-Hajjaj. Al-Hajjaj is the founder of Wasit. Al-Hajjaj, one of the generals of Banu Umayyah, he was, by the way, a very brutal general, very brutal, very violent. But he established the city of Wasit in Iraq. So somebody comes and say, Sayyidah Aisha died in Wasit, you know that he's saying he's lying. It's wrong. Maybe he did not mean to lie, but it's wrong. So knowledge of history is very important. And I have noticed that many people in our time, sometimes people of knowledge, have no idea about history. And this is really a big handicap. Besides knowledge of the narrators, have to classify the narrators. Narrators as the hadith have classification, the narrators have classification. The best narrators that have been listed are some companions did not narrate much because either they did not spend time with the Prophet ﷺ, or they did not have that strong memory. So the classification of narrator is called the science of men, and in Arabic it means al-jarh wa ta'dil. I don't know how to translate it. Al-jarh wa ta'dil. If I want to do it, translate it literally, it means al-jarh means how to investigate, ta'dil and reclassify. So investigate personalities and people and classify them along the different level of strength. So this is basically what I'm mentioning about hadith. I want just show you some hadiths that are very famous, and they're all from the 40 hadiths. So this hadith is really the foundation of fiqh in Islam, and it's the first hadith in the 40 hadiths. It's narrated by Umar ibn Khattab, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, say, actions are by intention, and every man shall have but that he which intended. Thus he whose migration was for Allah and His Messenger, his migration was for Allah and His Messenger. And he whose migration was to achieve some worldly benefit or to take some woman in marriage, his migration is for that which he migrated. This is a very foundation of fiqh. Yes.
So you mentioned that the Bukhari and Muslim they had the toughest criteria for measuring hadith.
Yes.
So if it's narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, should we also assume that it's also narrated by the other four?
No, not necessarily, because they did not all of them met each other, not all of them met the same people that were conveying the hadith. Yeah. So this is a book about intention. The law or the Sharia would take people according to their actions. But in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's completely different stories by intention. So this hadith basically was in the context of when people migrated to Medina, when they were oppressed, and the Prophet ﷺ told them to leave Mecca and to migrate to Medina. So this was the highest level of jihad. But one man who wanted to marry a Muslim lady who migrated because he wanted to marry her. And all the Sahaba knew him. So they call him the migrant of this lady. So he did not migrate for the sake of Allah or to obey the Prophet ﷺ. So that was narrated in that context, and you can measure it on any other context. That's why the scholars always try to concentrate on your intention to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People you may do things for the sake of people. Try to make it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of people. The next hadith is a long one. It's the second hadith in the 40 hadiths. It talks about Jibreel coming to the Prophet ﷺ, and the companions did not know who he is, but he, as a stranger, he came in the form of a human being. They found that they don't know him, but he looked like he was not in travel, because if you're coming in the desert, you would be covered with dust or not looking very handsome. They found a very handsome person and come and started asking the Prophet questions. Asked him about Islam, asked him about Iman, asked him about when the hour will come. And so this is one of the hadiths that, again, foundations of Aqidah and theology, where he told the Prophet, Islam is to testify that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. To perform the prayers, to pay the zakah, to fast in Ramadan, and to make the pilgrimage to the house if you are able to do so. And then he answered, the Prophet ﷺ told him this, he told me, you've spoken right. The Sahaba got amazed. How a person would teach the Prophet. And then he asked another question. Tell him about Iman. And he said, I'm showing the answers of the Prophet in green. The second answer of the Prophet, it is to believe in Allah, His angels, his books, his messengers, and the last day, and to believe in divine destiny, both the good and the evil thereof. He said, you have spoken rightly. Then he told him about ihsan. Ihsan is the highest level of iman. And the Prophet answered, it is to worship Allah as though you are seeing Him. And while you see Him not, yet truly He sees you. And then he asked him, tell him about the hour. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ answered. The one questioned about it knows no better than the question. It means that Jibreel does not know when the hour is going to be, and the Prophet did not know when the hour is going to be. So Jibreel told him, tell me about its signs. And the Prophet ﷺ answered him that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress, that you will see the barefooted, naked, destitute herdsmen competing, constructing lofty buildings, which we see today. The people of Arabia now are competing in big buildings. So we have seen this being fulfilled now. And then he told the Sahaba, told Umar, oh Umar, do you know who the questioner was? And Umar said, Allah and His Messenger knows best. He said, he was Jibreel who came to you to teach you religion. And this is in the 40 Hadith by Imam Nawawi. These are other examples of the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. Part of someone's being a good Muslim is his leaving alone that which does not concern him. And of course, this does not apply except to private things. Just people have to keep their privacy. And of course, we live in a country that respects part of privacy, although you see that people are really hurting each other by showing their dirty laundry and so on. But privacy is very important in Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ emphasized it. Another hadith where he said, none of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. Okay? When brother means brother and sister, so men and women. This is the advice of the Prophet ﷺ to his cousin, Abdullah ibn Abbas. Again, one of the foundations of belief, where he told him, be mindful of Allah, and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah, and you will find Him in front of you. If you ask of Allah. If you seek help from Allah. Know that if the nation were to gather to benefit you with anything, it would benefit you only with something that Allah had already prescribed for you. And that if they gather to harm you with anything, they would harm you only with something Allah had already prescribed for you. The pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. That's narrated by At-Tirmidhi. And it says Sahih. True means Sahih. And there is another narration. And as you see, when you see there is another narration from the same companion, it means that the people did not memorize the words in exact the same way. And this is something important to, when you see different narrations of the hadith with different words, it's because the Sahaba maintained the meaning but could not maintain the exact words. Okay. These are more hadith. Among the words obtained from the first prophecy, means from prophets before the Prophet ﷺ, if you feel no shame, then do as you wish. And today we see people have no shame anymore. We live in societies where people have no shame. We live among the world where countries have no shame. I mean, when we see what's happening in the Middle East today, there is no shame from going and killing thousands of people with no shame, going to war and doing these awful things. When Allah decreed the creation, He pledged Himself by writing in His book, which is laid down with Him, my mercy prevails over my wrath. This is a beautiful hadith narrated by Muslim, Al-Bukhari, and Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah. So this is the case where the 4 books of hadith have mentioned. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to prevail. It's a beautiful hadith, just gives hope for any person who did something wrong, wronged himself or wronged others. So that's the last hadith that I wanted to mention. Also mentioned in the 40 hadith, spend on charity, O son of Adam, and I shall spend on you. Ask anybody who donates for charity, they will tell you always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide for them after that. Your money will never decrease by giving charity. So I'll stop here. Yes?
Did you explain what the Hadith Qudsi is?
No, I did not. I should explain that. Hadith Qudsi is the words of the Prophet coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Different than the Quran. The Quran is the word of Allah. But the Hadith Qudsi is a revelation by Allah to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet used his own words to explain it. So that's why it would be like the Prophet ﷺ would say that Allah had revealed to me to say that. And it's different than the Quran. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ always made the distinction between what he says and the Quran. So that's all I have today. If you have any questions.